Next, in a bit of a legal win for President Trump in his personal capacity, you have a Florida judge allowing his $10 billion defamation case against the BBC to move forward in court. Now, the BBC was attempting to have the case dismissed altogether, but the judge threw out their request, and instead, he set concrete dates for when the hearing will be held. And this case actually represents a big problem for the BBC because they have already admitted to deceptively editing a news program to make Trump look terrible. And so now they're basically forced to use legal technicalities to try and have the case dismissed. And so today, let's go through the details of the case together, as well as where it currently stands in the court. And if you appreciate content like this, please do smash those like and subscribe buttons, which will force the YouTube algorithm to pick this video up and share it with ever more people. Thank you so much for that. Now, to start with, earlier in this week, we did an episode on our program regarding the $10 billion lawsuit that President Trump has filed against the Treasury Department and the IRS. However, I didn't mention in that episode, that is not the only $10 billion lawsuit that Trump currently has in the courts. That's because, besides the one with the IRS, President Trump is currently suing the BBC for defamation, asking them also for a cool $10 billion in damages. Quote, the lawsuit was filed in December after a BBC Panorama episode broadcast in 2024 came under scrutiny for creating the impression that Trump had encouraged violence among his supporters on January 6, 2021. Basically, what the BBC did in one of their episodes of a program that they call Panorama was to splice together different parts of President Trump's speech, a speech that he gave in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, to make it appear as if he was calling on his supporters who were present to walk over to the Capitol and to engage in some form of violence. And the BBC did this by basically splicing out a lengthy section of the speech in which President Trump called for peaceful protest. To show you what actually happened, let me show you a side-by-side comparison of the actual speech versus what the BBC decided to air. Take a look.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them. But I said, something's wrong here. Something's really wrong. Can't have happened. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
And then furthermore, to add injury to insult, the BBC aired this deceptively edited program on October 28th, 2024, literally just 1 week before the 2024 presidential election. Now, eventually someone caught on. There was a leaked internal report that was made public, and this caused a lot of problems for the BBC. The backlash was so severe that it caused the BBC's Director General, basically their equivalent of a CEO, as well as their head of news, to resign altogether. But then on top of the problem with public perception, there was the legal trouble. Shortly afterwards, President Trump, in his personal capacity, although after he reclaimed the White House, he filed a lawsuit against the BBC for defamation. Quote, the lawsuit alleges the BBC defamed Trump and violated a Florida law that bars deceptive and unfair trade practices. The president is seeking at least $5 billion in damages for each of the two separate counts in the lawsuit. Now, part of the reason that Trump filed this lawsuit in his home state of Florida rather than in a UK court has to do with the statute of limitations. Quote, Trump is unable to sue the BBC for defamation in the UK as the 1-year limitation for doing so has passed since the broadcasting of the program. In Florida, the time limit is 2 years. And it's this fact, the fact that he is suing in the state of Florida, which will probably ultimately make this case a lot harder for Trump. That's because one of the legal arguments that the BBC is using in their defense is that they're saying that their program did not actually air in Florida, and therefore a Florida court does not have jurisdiction in the matter. Quote, the BBC said previously it would seek to have the case dismissed, arguing that the court lacks jurisdiction because it did not broadcast the program in Florida and that the president could not prove damages because he was reelected in 2024 after it aired. The corporation disputes Trump's claim that the Panorama episode in question was available in the United States on the BritBox streaming service. BBC iPlayer's geo-blocked although lawyers have argued it could be watched by Americans using a VPN, which is an interesting legal argument. Trump's team is basically saying that somebody could have watched that episode in Florida using a VPN, and therefore, because they could have watched it, the jurisdiction exists. Now, whether that argument will ultimately hold up in court is yet to be determined. All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment, I'd like to introduce today's sponsor, Shen Yun Performing Arts. It is the preeminent best Chinese classical dance performance in the world, but funny enough, they're actually based right here in the US, and they're not allowed to perform in China. Part of the show, it exposes the crimes of the Chinese Communist Party, and so ironically, they can't even go there. But the show itself is great. I've personally seen it several times, and the athleticism, the artistry, the stories are phenomenal. Some of them are touching, some are funny, a lot of them are thought-provoking, and you're not really allowed to film the show, but basically it looked exactly like the commercials do. Beautiful colors, a full orchestra right there in the theater. They also have the screen in the back that's perfectly timed with the dancers, so sometimes it looks like they're jumping in and out of the screen to tell the story, which is cool. But the best part is that it's just super uplifting in a moral sense. I feel like every time I watch it, I leave the theater as a better person than I did coming in. And most shows nowadays, at least in my opinion, are really subversive and they sneak in some communist elements. But Shen Yun is different. They really showcase traditional culture. And even though it's Chinese, it actually probably resonates with everyone. So check it out. They have shows coming up in like 100 different cities: Dallas, Houston, New York, Memphis, Charlotte, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Seattle, pretty much everywhere else in between. And the best part is that to our viewers, they're offering a special promotional deal. Just buy your tickets over on the Shen Yun website and use promo code ROMAN26 to avoid paying both the ticketing fee as well as the facility fee. That's again promo code ROMAN26. I'll throw a link to the website where you can find all the different show dates and cities. It'll be down in the description box below. However, it has proven successful thus far. That's because the BBC was attempting to have this defamation case dismissed altogether and to put an immediate end to the discovery phase of the lawsuit, which, for your reference, the discovery phase is when President Trump's legal team could go in and obtain evidence such as emails, texts, and other such things from the BBC. But the judge in the case was not having it. And to that end, late last week, you had Judge Roy Altman deny the BBC's request to dismiss the case, as well as their request to stop the discovery process. Quote, a judge has rejected the BBC's application to dismiss a $10 billion defamation lawsuit brought by U.S. President Donald Trump over its editing of a speech that made it appear that he encouraged violence at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Lawyers acting for Britain's publicly owned broadcaster had asked the judge to dismiss the claim, but the case is now set for a 2-week hearing beginning February 15th, 2027 at a Miami courthouse. U.S. District Judge Roy Altman denied the broadcaster's application to stay the discovery phase of the lawsuit when each party can obtain evidence from the other. The judge said the BBC's application was premature and had failed to demonstrate that the broadcaster would be prejudiced if the stay was not granted, meaning that both the discovery phase can now proceed and that a 2-week hearing has been scheduled for February 15th of next year, 2027. However, in terms of the immediate next steps, the two sides must now select a mediator by March 3rd of this year and schedule a time, a date, and a place for mediation. And it might actually just be solved there in mediation. For instance, Trump's other cases against both ABC News as well as CBS's 60 Minutes program, they were both settled out of court. And so it might just wind up happening here with the BBC as well. If it doesn't, though, here, for your reference, would be the criteria for Trump to actually be able to win damages in court. Quote, to win damages, Trump's lawyers will have to prove that the episode of Panorama in question was viewed in the United States and that it caused serious damage to his reputation. And so we'll just have to wait and see how this case ultimately plays itself out. Whenever big developments happen in this particular case, I will give you updates as they come around. But in the interim, if you want to read the entirety of the 33-page lawsuit from Trump's legal team for yourself, I will throw the link to the PDF version of it. You'll be able to find it down in the description box below, which is, again, right next to those like and subscribe buttons, both of which I hope you smash. You smashed already, but if you haven't, now's another opportunity. Smash them. Make sure this episode reaches as many people as possible. And then, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free.